The room went completely silent when the new investor stopped mid-handshake. He looked straight at me and said, "Wait. Lily, as in that Lily." My boss turned pale. Because 3 weeks earlier, he had fired me in front of the entire office like I was nothing. If you've ever been underestimated, humiliated, or discarded after giving everything you had, you're going to want to hear this one till the very end. Hit like, subscribe, and settle in, because this is one of those revenge stories where justice doesn't just knock. It kicks the door down. My name is Lily, and this is my story. I gave that company 4 years of my life. Not the neat, Instagram-worthy version of hustle culture. I'm talking about real sacrifice. Missed birthdays. Cancelled holidays. Weekends hunched over spreadsheets while my friends were living their lives. When I joined the firm, it was barely surviving. 2 major clients had just walked away. Morale was low. Turnover was worse. But I believed in what we could become. I rebuilt broken client relationships one phone call at a time. I stayed late coaching junior staff who were ready to quit. I helped land contracts that literally kept the lights on. And every time someone said, "We couldn't have done this without you," I believed it meant something. My boss, let's call him Mark, was the kind of man who loved credit more than competence. He smiled in meetings. He shook hands loudly. And when something went wrong, he always had someone else to blame. But when things went right, suddenly it was his vision. His leadership. I noticed it. I swallowed it. Because I thought loyalty would eventually be rewarded. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday. Nothing dramatic. No warning signs. Mark stood up during our weekly team meeting, tapped his pen against the glass table, and said, "Lily, can you stay back for a moment?" I didn't think anything of it. Then he didn't wait. He turned to the room and said, loudly, "Actually, no. Let's do this now." My stomach dropped. He looked straight at me and said, "We are moving in a different direction. Today will be your last day. No paperwork. No HR. No explanation. Just eyes on me." Whispers starting. Someone avoiding eye contact. I remember my hands going numb. I asked, quietly, "Is there a reason?" Mark shrugged. "It's just business. Just business." 4 years reduced to a sentence. He gestured toward my desk. "Please pack up your things by the end of the day." I felt heat rush to my face. Not anger. Humiliation. I packed my box in silence while my co-workers pretended not to watch. And I walked out with my head high, because I refused to cry where he could see it. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by unopened mail and rejection emails I hadn't even sent yet. I kept replaying it. What did I do wrong? Why me? Then I remembered something. Something my father had said years ago, right before he passed. My dad wasn't flashy. He was quiet. Strategic. Before he died, he'd invested quietly, never bragged, never talked about it. One night, while we were going through his old documents, he smiled and said, "Lily, one day, you'll understand why I put my name where I did." At the time, I didn't. But 3 weeks after I was fired, the company announced a major investor meeting. And that's when everything clicked. I did some digging. And my heart started racing. The incoming investment group, led by a man named Richard Hale. A name I recognized immediately. Because Richard Hale had been my father's closest business partner. And buried deep in those old documents was something Mark never knew. My father hadn't just invested. He'd structured the funding in a way that gave family oversight rights in leadership decisions. Which meant they couldn't finalize anything without my involvement. 3 weeks later, I walked into that same office. Not as an employee. As a guest. Mark froze when he saw me. He forced a smile. "Lily, what are you doing here?" Before I could answer, Richard walked in. Tall. Calm. Commanding. He shook Mark's hand, then stopped when he saw me. His eyes widened. "Lily?" The room went silent. Lily, as in Robert Carter's daughter. Mark's face drained of color. Richard turned to the room. "Why wasn't I told she was let go?" Mark stammered. "Well, she was just an employee." Richard cut him off. "No. She was the reason your retention numbers stabilized." Mark opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Richard placed a folder on the table. "According to this agreement, any termination affecting operational continuity requires review." He slid it toward Mark. "Which didn't happen." The board murmured. I spoke for the first time. Calm. Steady. I wasn't fired for performance. I was removed because I was inconvenient. Mark snapped. "That's ridiculous." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Then explain why her accounts outperformed yours." Silence. Mark was sweating now. The board excused him from the room. When he came back, his position was under review. The investment went through. With conditions. Leadership restructuring. Public apology. And an offer. Not to return to my old job, but to lead a division. I accepted. Not because I needed revenge, but because I deserved recognition. As for Mark, he resigned quietly 2 months later. No farewell email. No speeches. Just gone. I learned something important that day. People who underestimate you often assume you'll stay silent. But silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it means patience. If this story gave you chills, hit like. If you've ever been wronged and dreamed of justice, drop a comment below. And if you want more stories where karma shows up right on time, subscribe. Because trust me, the best revenge stories are still coming.